and welcome to World Talks. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. All eyes on Greenland as decisive election approaches. Greenland, the world's largest island, strategically located exactly in the middle between Russia and the United States, remain a self-governing territory of Denmark. As Greenland holds parliamentary election on March 11th, the island's future is at stake. Will it push for independence amid Donald Trump's interests? Let's get the Danish perspective on the matter with Anders Vistisen, the Danish MEP, Patriots for Europe Group. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us this morning. So first, I would like to listen to your famous speech at the European Parliament. So let's take a listen.
Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, f*** off.
So my first question to you is, why did you use precisely those wording? Do you believe this is the kind of rhetoric that is necessary today in a dialogue with the United States?
I think it's very clear that Trump mostly understands blunt and direct speech. I can see that Europe has tried a very diplomatic route when it comes to Trump regarding Arctic, regarding Ukraine, and not getting very far with it. So yes, I think it is very offensive that an American president, after Danish soldiers have been allied in Iraq, Afghanistan, had some of the highest casualties per capita, now threatens with economical and military intervention in our country.
All right. We have listened to Donald Trump. I think all the world have heard we are going to have Greenland one way or the other. That were his words. But he addressed the Greenlanders also directly in the speech to U.S. Congress, saying he respects Greenlanders' rights to self-determination. And I will quote him, "We will make you rich, we will keep you safe." So do you think that the Greenlanders are more prone to listen to Donald Trump as the election approaches right now?
Nothing shows that. There was an opinion poll conducted by Danish and Greenlandic media in combination, and 85% of the Greenlandic population rejected to be part of the USA. And I think for good reason. Of course, Greenland can have a debate of independence. It's not very realistic with the American sentiment that they will never be allowed fully independence with that strategic position in such a huge island with only 50,000 inhabitants. But if you look at how the US have treated their indigenous people, if you look at how they are treating their overseas territories, I think there is a very good case to be made that the Danish, that Greenland as a part of the Danish kingdom have had a much better treatment. For instance, Greenland is overrepresented in the Danish parliament with 2 seats, where dominions as the US Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico doesn't have any representation in the American Congress and are not even allowed to vote as the president's elections.
Right. The Greenland has a complex international status. We know that it remains self-governing, but its foreign, defense and monetary policies are still conducted by Copenhagen. So how popular is the separatist movement in Greenland? Do you think that the Greenlanders would want to separate from Denmark?
There is an aspiration for independence, but at the same time, when you do polls in Greenland, the majority say that they would like independence, but at the same time, they would not like independence if it means a fall in the standard of living. And since that Denmark is paying 40% of the Greenlandic public budget directly by subsidies, and on top of that, we are also paying for very important institutions such as police, court systems and other things. It's not very realistic to see a path for Greenlandic independence where they are economically able to take care of themselves. At the same time, 40,000 to 60,000 people will not be able to defend the world's largest island. So they will need some sort of cooperation agreement with a partner to be able to do their foreign affairs, whether that's Denmark or US, Russia or China is of course a Greenlandic decision, but I think they'll get the best treatment in Denmark.
All right, so today, big day for Greenlanders. They are voting in the parliamentary elections. 31 seats in Inatsisartut. Sorry for my pronunciation. But how do you predict the composition of the parliament after these elections? And which parties representing what vision for Greenland's future will have the majority?
It's difficult to say because the population is so small that no polls have been conducted. But the two traditional big parties in Greenland have been IA and Sirimut. Those two parties are now in a coalition government. So it's basically a grand coalition of the two traditional parties of the Greenlandic leadership. They both claim the position of Prime Minister of Greenland. So most likely is that one of the two parties will emerge victorious. Both of them have sort of downplayed the rhetoric on independence quite a bit due to the American due to Mr. Trump's announcement and his communications. They have also, both party leaders, been out in the last days criticizing Mr. Trump. And then on the one side of those two, you have a more radical independence party who are claiming independence now. So one of the things that we are looking very closely at during these elections is how strong will that fraction be. And to the right of these two parties, they are both socialist parties. One is connected to the hard left and one is more social democratic in orientation, and to the right of them you have two smaller right-wing parties. So I think what is going to be defining for Greenland's future is what kind of coalition is formed after the elections, and that's very much into the open right now.
Absolutely. So do you think a referendum could be organized and held in Greenland after following the parliamentary elections? And if such a referendum took place, what would be the Denmark's position? Would it somehow honor the decision, or would it also try to interfere?
With the views in the election campaign, I don't think that they will hold an election within 4 years, within the next parliamentary term. There is a lot of talk about how independence should be prepared. There's a lot of unanswered questions. One is the economy. Greenland doesn't have a big private sector, so it's heavily subsidized, as I mentioned before. The other issue is that there's a lot of social issues. There's issues of homelessness. There's issues of a very high rate of child abuse in Greenland. There's issues of alcoholism. All of these social issues also play very heavily in this national campaign that they are having in Greenland. So there is also some very important daily issues that need to be resolved. There is actually in the so-called home rule legislation described how a Greenlandic independence could look, and that will demand a referendum in Greenland that's called by a majority of the Greenlandic Parliament, and subsequent negotiations with Denmark. But in Denmark, there is only very few parties who've said that they will not honor such a result for Greenlandic independence. So there's no doubt that if they call for the independence, the most tricky issue will be that there is in Greenland a demand that Denmark should continue to pay this very high amount to Greenland after independence, where the Danish position is that if you want independence, you can have it, but you can of course not keep the money from the Danish taxpayers if you are independent. Then you have to find your own revenue. So in reality, it comes back to this schisma I described before. Do Greenlanders want independence more than they want a fall in their standard of living? If they don't want a fall in standard of living, they will have to wait quite a bit before they are ready for independence. Right now, the Greenlandic economy is at a halt, and there's no really aspiration for it to be more independent of Danish subsidies with the current trajectory.
All right, so now let's turn to the Danish perspective, because this is very interesting. Why is Greenland important to Denmark? And what do you think the Greenlanders' future will be?
First of all, as I mentioned in my speech in the plenary, the Danish Vikings settled in Danish and Norwegian Vikings at the time settled in Greenland, or actually almost 1,000 years ago, and before the Inuit population came over from Canada. So of course we see Greenland and the Faroe Islands as a part of Denmark. It is a united kingdom as the UK in the sense that we have three parts: Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands, which are led in combination by the Danish Parliament in foreign affairs and defense. So I think for many there is this historical connection to Greenland that of course we would like to continue to have a good relation to the people of Greenland. There's also a lot of Danes who are a little bit fed up with the rhetoric in Greenland and what is seen by like an unthankfulness to Denmark regarding how much we are contributing. Almost 40% of the people in the healthcare, doctors, nurses, and so on, are people that we have to send from Denmark as temps, just to have the Greenlandic healthcare system work. So we do a lot of things to keep Greenland standard of living up, and I think many Danes are a little bit fed up with the rhetoric from the Greenlandic politicians that are talking very much as a colonial prospect. They have used the word genocide towards Denmark's treatment of Greenland, and I think many Danes don't recognize this very harsh language that have been used from Greenlandic politicians.
Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen says that Greenlanders are not for sale. That's a quotation, but they absolutely feel the attention of the world right now and find their voices greatly amplified on the world stage. Could they vote for a better future if promised investments or social benefits by Donald Trump's administration?
Again, I would encourage them to see how the US is treating the US Virgin Islands or any other overseas territory and seeing how little they are contributing to those areas with regard to what Denmark is doing in Greenland. The other thing is that there is nothing hindering American mining companies or other mining companies from operating in Greenland. Actually, the Greenlandic population and politician would like to have that activity, but so far no modern mining venture in Greenland have been successful economically. And that is what's stopping mining in Greenland. That is, it's too remote, there's no population there's no infrastructure to do the mining operation. So it's a little bit of a pipe dream that Trump is dreaming up. And when it comes to security, I think sometimes the Americans forget that they have a military agreement. Greenland is a part of NATO, as is Denmark. They have had military presence in Greenland since 1941. They actually, during the Cold War, had 3 military bases in Greenland, the Americans, and they closed down 2 of them. So there would be no problem, neither from Greenland or from Denmark, to accept a larger NATO presence in Greenland. But it is the American who have scaled back military presence, not the Danish or Greenlandic who have requested that. So I think most of all this comes down to Trump's aspiration to grow America, to be the first president for 100 years that have enlarged American territory, more than it comes down to any of these arguments about rare earth materials or security.
And quickly, just to wrap up, if you could tell us, how does the Greenland situation impact the internal Danish politics?
Of course, it is on the security policy very important. We see US abandoning Ukraine, which is also a big thing in Danish politics. So I think right now we are at a seismic shift in Danish politics, where we have been transatlantic and been pro-American since the Second World War. And now we have to reconfigure whether we can still depend on America as an allied and friendly nation, or whether we have to reorient our foreign affairs policy towards the northern part of NATO, Poland, Baltic countries, Scandinavia, and the UK seems to be more reliable partners when it comes to security and defense than the current administration in Washington.
Thank you so much, Anders Vistisen, Danish member of European Parliament, Patriots for Europe. Thank you so much for being with us, for joining us, and have a good day, sir. And thank you for watching. That resumes this edition of World Talks, but please stay tuned to TVP World for more news and more coverage.